You shall be Blacula.
Imagine pitching this to a Hollywood studio in 1972. It's Dracula, but the vampire is a dignified African prince cursed by racism, and he's prowling. 1970s Los Angeles to a funk soundtrack. They'd probably laugh you out of the room, right? But that's exactly what Blacula was. And against all odds, it became one of the highest-grossing films of 1972, won the very first Saturn Award for Best Horror Film, and launched an entire subgenre of black horror cinema. This wasn't just another blaxploitation cash grab trying to capitalize on a trend. Behind that campy title was a classically trained Shakespearean actor who refused to play a stereotype, a first-time director who believed in the project, and a story that dared to make Dracula himself the villain for his complicity in the slave trade. Blacula is a cult classic that's so much more interesting than its title suggests, and the stories behind its creation are just as wild as anything that made it to screen. Fact number 1. Let's start with the script that almost ruined everything. The original screenplay for Blacula wasn't called Blacula at all. It was titled Count Brown's in Town, and it was terrible. We're talking full-on racial stereotypes, shuckin' and jivin' dialogue, every cliche you can imagine about black characters reduced to caricatures for white audiences to laugh at. It was exploitation in the worst sense of the word. Enter William Marshall, a classically trained Shakespearean actor who'd performed Othello on stages around the world, who'd studied his craft seriously and built a reputation as one of the most dignified black actors in Hollywood. When Marshall read that original script, he could have walked away. Many actors would have. The money was probably decent, and 1972 wasn't exactly overflowing with leading roles for black actors in major films. But Marshall didn't walk. Instead, he made demands. He told the producers that if they wanted him for this film, the script needed serious rewrites, not minor tweaks, wholesale changes to give his character dignity, depth, and a backstory that mattered. And here's the remarkable part. They agreed. Marshall worked directly with director William Crane and the producers to transform what could have been a forgettable, offensive exploitation flick into something that actually had substance and respect for its lead character. That kind of creative control was almost unheard of for a black actor in the early 70s. But Marshall's reputation and his unwavering standards made it happen. Fact number 2. The most significant change Marshall fought for was the character's name and origin story. In the original Count Brown's in Town script, the vampire was just called Andrew Brown, about as generic and uninspired as you can get. Marshall recognized that if this character was going to have any dignity or cultural weight, he needed an identity that honored African heritage rather than erasing it. So Marshall insisted on changing the name to Prince Mamuwalde, not just a vampire, not just a victim of Dracula's curse, but an African prince, royalty with a lineage, with power, with a history that predated his transformation. The name Mamuwalde itself sounds regal, sounds important. It demands to be taken seriously in a way that Andrew Brown never could. More than just a name change, Marshall worked to develop Mamuwalde's entire backstory. He's not randomly turned into a vampire. He goes to Transylvania with a specific noble purpose, to convince Count Dracula to use his influence to help end the slave trade. Think about how bold that is as a framing device. This black prince is positioned as morally superior to the legendary Dracula, seeking to protect his people from one of history's greatest atrocities. And Dracula's refusal, his mocking transformation of Mamuwalde into a vampire, and his bestowing of the derisive name Blacula, becomes an act of racist violence rather than just random horror movie evil. This backstory transformed everything. Suddenly, Blacula wasn't just a vampire movie. It was a film about how racism curses its victims, about how white supremacy literally tries to strip away dignity and identity, about the ongoing suffering caused by slavery and colonialism. All because William Marshall refused to play a stereotype and demanded his character be treated with respect. Fact number 3. Here's something that might surprise you. Prince Mamuwalde was the first black vampire to appear in a feature film. Before 1972, vampire movies were overwhelmingly white European affairs. Dracula, Nosferatu, Carmilla, all these classic bloodsuckers were pale aristocratic figures from Transylvania or other Gothic European settings. The idea of a black vampire simply didn't exist in mainstream cinema. Blacula broke that barrier completely. And it wasn't just representation for representation's sake. It was culturally significant because it challenged who got to be the monster, who got to be powerful and feared, who got to command the screen in a horror film. For decades, black characters in horror movies had been servants, victims, comic relief, or the first to die. They weren't the titular character. They didn't get their name in the title. They weren't the ones audiences came to see. William Marshall's Mamuwalde changed that entirely. He's imposing at 6'5" with a deep bass voice that could shake a room. He's articulate, intelligent, tortured by his condition, but dangerous nonetheless. He's romantic and tragic. He's everything Dracula was allowed to be in previous films. But he's black, and that representation mattered enormously to audiences in 1972 and continues to matter today. Blacula opened doors for black actors in horror, proving that they could carry these films and that audiences would show up to see them. Fact number 4. Let's talk about that opening sequence because it's genuinely radical for 1972. Prince Mamuwalde travels to Transylvania with his wife Luva, specifically to ask Count Dracula to help end the slave trade. He's not there as a supplicant or a fool. He's there as a fellow noble trying to appeal to Dracula's better nature, to convince him to use his supernatural influence for good. Dracula's response is to refuse outright, insult Mamuwalde, make unwanted advances toward his wife, and then curse him with vampirism. He sneers the name Blacula as a deliberate mockery, sealing Mamuwalde in a coffin where he'll suffer for centuries. It's not just transformation, it's racist humiliation. Dracula literally enslaves Mamuwalde in that coffin while Luva dies of grief, making Dracula complicit in exactly the kind of evil Mamuwalde was trying to stop. This framing is brilliant because it positions Dracula, the iconic white European vampire, as explicitly racist. He's not just evil in some abstract Gothic way. He's refusing to help end human trafficking. He's objectifying a black woman, and he's punishing a black man for daring to challenge him. The vampire curse becomes a metaphor for how racism works, how white supremacy takes agency away from black people, tries to erase their identity, condemns them to suffering. Every time Mamuwalde introduces himself by his real name, rather than the slave name Blacula that Dracula forced on him, it's an act of resistance against that erasure. Fact number 5. Blacula was shot on location in Los Angeles, which gave the film an authentic urban texture that studio work could never achieve. They filmed in Watts, the predominantly black neighborhood that had been the site of major riots in 1965, giving the movie a connection to real black communities and real struggles. These weren't generic city streets. They were specific locations with history and meaning. The film's final confrontation takes place at the Hyperion Outfall Treatment Plant in Playa del Rey, this massive industrial sewage treatment facility that looks absolutely otherworldly on camera. Those huge concrete structures, the brutalist architecture, the sense of being in the bowels of the city's infrastructure. It's a perfect setting for a vampire's last stand. It's gritty, it's real, and it's completely different from the Gothic castles and fog-shrouded graveyards of traditional vampire films. Shooting on location in LA also meant the production could capture the city's 1970s black culture authentically. The nightclubs, the fashion, the cars, the way people talked and moved. It's all genuine, rather than a white filmmaker's imagination of what black life looked like. This authenticity was crucial to Blacula's success, with black audiences who could see their own communities reflected on screen in a horror film for the first time. Fact number 6. One of the most distinctive things about Blacula is its soundtrack. Traditional horror films relied on chilling classical music. Think of those ominous organs, those shrieking violins, that Gothic orchestration designed to make you jump. Blacula threw all that out and went funk. Gene Page composed a groovy funk soundtrack that's unlike anything you'd hear in a typical horror film. Instead of trying to create dread through dissonance, Page's music pulses with life. It's sensual, it's rhythmic, it's got soul. The soundtrack grounds the film in the black musical tradition of the early 70s, the same era that gave us Curtis Mayfield's Superfly, Isaac Hayes' Shaft, and Marvin Gaye's What's Going On. Additional music came from the Hues Corporation, who contribute to the nightclub scenes and give them authenticity. This was before the Hues Corporation hit it big with Rock the Boat in 1974, so Blacula actually captured them right before they became a household name. That funky, soulful music doesn't diminish the horror. It enhances it by making the world feel real and lived in, rather than just a Gothic fantasy. Fact number 7. Speaking of the Hues Corporation, they don't just provide music for Blacula. They actually appear in the film performing in a nightclub scene. It's one of those great moments where you get to see an early 70s R&B group in action, captured on film before they became famous. The nightclub sequences in Blacula are fantastic because they showcase black social life, black fashion, black music, all the things that made up the cultural fabric of the community. These aren't scenes where white people are slumming in a black neighborhood or where black characters exist only to serve white protagonists. This is black people living their lives, enjoying themselves, being beautiful and stylish and having fun, and then horror intrudes into that world. Having the Hues Corporation perform in the film adds an extra layer of authenticity. These weren't actors pretending to be musicians. They were actual performers doing what they did best. When Rock the Boat became a massive hit 2 years later, it gave Blacula this retroactive cool factor. You can watch the film now and think, oh, that's the Hues Corporation before they were famous. It's a time capsule of early 70s black entertainment culture. Fact number 8. Here's a behind-the-scenes production detail that shows just how low-budget Blacula really was. American International Pictures, known for churning out cheap exploitation films, saved money by reusing footage from an earlier vampire movie they'd produced called Count Yorga, Vampire from 1970. Specifically, they lifted shots of a cargo ship at the docks and a red pickup truck transporting a coffin. If you've seen Count Yorga, those shots will look very familiar when they pop up in Blacula. It's classic low-budget filmmaking. Why pay to shoot new footage when you've already got perfectly good vampire coffin transportation shots sitting in the archives? This kind of corner cutting was standard practice for American International Pictures. They made films fast and cheap, recycling sets, props, and footage whenever possible. The miracle of Blacula is that despite these budgetary constraints and production shortcuts, the film still works. William Marshall's performance is so strong, the social commentary so pointed, the direction so assured that you don't really notice or care that some shots are borrowed from another movie. It proves that good filmmaking isn't about having unlimited resources. It's about using what you have effectively. Fact number 9. Blacula won the very first Saturn Award for Best Horror Film in 1973. The Saturn Awards, given by the Academy of Science Fiction, Fantasy, and Horror Films, originally known as the Count Dracula Society, were brand new, and Blacula was their inaugural horror winner. That's historically significant. Think about what that means. The very first film ever honored by this organization for excellence in horror was one that centered a black vampire, challenged racist tropes, and reimagined what horror could be. It set a precedent that horror didn't have to be white, European, and Gothic to be worthy of recognition. It validated the blaxploitation horror subgenre as legitimate cinema rather than just disposable exploitation. William Marshall was also personally honored by the Academy that year for his performance. This recognition meant a lot to him, especially given the criticism he'd received from some quarters for appearing in a blaxploitation film. When even the Beverly Hills Hollywood NAACP president called his portrayal demeaning before being forced to resign by his own constituency who disagreed, Marshall must have felt vindicated when the horror community itself recognized the dignity and power of his work. The Saturn Award confirmed that he'd achieved exactly what he set out to do: create a vampire character worthy of respect. Fact number 10. Blacula was the feature film directorial debut of William Crane, who'd previously worked in television directing episodes of The Mod Squad. This was his shot at the big screen, his chance to prove he could helm a theatrical release, and he absolutely delivered. Blacula looks and feels like it was made by someone with much more experience. The tragedy is that despite Blacula's success at the box office and with critics, Crane's feature film career essentially stalled out afterward. He only directed one more theatrical film in his lifetime: Dr. Black, Mr. Hyde in 1976, another blaxploitation horror film that tried to capitalize on Blacula's success but never achieved the same cultural impact. Why didn't Crane get more opportunities? That's the frustrating reality of Hollywood in the 70s. Even when black directors proved they could make profitable, entertaining films, the industry didn't open doors the way it should have. Crane returned to television work, directing episodes of various shows throughout the 80s and 90s, but he never got another chance to direct a major theatrical release. His career is a reminder that representation behind the camera mattered just as much as representation on screen, and Hollywood still had a long way to go in giving black filmmakers the opportunities they deserved. Fact number 11. Blacula's commercial success was enormous. It spawned an entire wave of blaxploitation-themed horror movies trying to capture the same magic. Suddenly, Hollywood realized there was an audience hungry for horror films that featured black characters, black culture, and black perspectives. The floodgates opened. We got Blackenstein, which is pretty much exactly what it sounds like: a Frankenstein story with a black protagonist. There was Ganja and Hess, a much more art house take on vampire mythology. Abby in 1974 was essentially a black version of The Exorcist, also starring William Marshall. Dr. Black, Mr. Hyde reimagined Jekyll and Hyde. Sugar Hill featured voodoo zombies. The list goes on and on. What's interesting is that American International Pictures, the studio that made Blacula, actually passed on Blackenstein despite it being an obvious attempt to replicate their success. They were too focused on making a direct Blacula sequel, Scream, Blacula, Scream, which came out in 1973 with Marshall reprising his role. The sequel didn't perform as well as the original, but it still helped cement Blacula's place in pop culture. These films created a subgenre that, while sometimes problematic and cheaply made, proved that black audiences deserved horror films made for them, about them, starring them. Fact number 12. Now, we need to address something uncomfortable because Blacula is very much a product of its time, and not all aspects of it have aged well. The film features offensive gay stereotypes in the form of two interior decorators, Bobby and Billy, who discover and open Blacula's coffin, becoming his first victims in the 1970s Los Angeles. These characters are portrayed using every cliché and stereotype about gay men that existed in the early 70s. They're depicted as frivolous, effeminate, and other characters use homophobic slurs when referring to them. Even contemporary reviewers, who praised the film overall, found these scenes cringeworthy and uncomfortable. It's a reminder that even progressive films pushing back against racism could still traffic in other forms of prejudice. The choice to make Blacula's first victims gay men also plays into some unfortunate implications about sexual threat and monstrosity. There's a history in horror of queer-coding villains, and having a vampire specifically target gay men adds an ugly layer to the film's subtext that likely wasn't intended but is impossible to ignore in retrospect. Watching Blacula today requires acknowledging these problematic elements while still appreciating what the film achieved in terms of Black representation. It's complicated, like so much art from this era. Fact number 13. Here's a fun piece of movie magic that doesn't quite work if you're paying attention. In one memorable action sequence, Blacula's opponents throw unlit oil lamps at the vampires. When the lamps break, they burst into flames like Molotov cocktails, except nobody ever lit them. There's no fire source. They're just glass lamps with oil that somehow spontaneously combust upon breaking. It's an obvious filming error, the kind of goof that happens when you're shooting quickly on a low budget and nobody catches it in time. You can imagine the scene was planned to have the characters light the lamps first, but either they forgot to shoot that part or it got cut in editing, and suddenly you've got magic self-igniting vampire fighting equipment. These kinds of continuity errors are part of Blacula's charm, though. They're evidence of the film's rough edges, the production rushing to get things done, the lack of resources for extensive reshoots or effects. In a weird way, these mistakes make the film more endearing. It's trying so hard to be a legitimate horror film on a shoestring budget, and when something goofy slips through, it reminds you that this was a passionate project made by people doing their best with limited resources. Fact number 14. One of the most puzzling mysteries in Blacula, and trust me, this has bothered horror fans for decades, is the morgue attendant's prosthetic hook hand. The character is played by veteran character actor Elisha Cook Jr., a familiar face from noir films and TV shows, and he's got this very obvious hook instead of one of his hands. The weird part? It's never explained, ever. It's not a plot point. Nobody comments on it. It doesn't factor into any of the vampire hunting. The character just happens to have a hook hand, and we're all supposed to accept this without question. It's the kind of detail that makes you think there must have been a deleted scene that explained it, or maybe it was written into an earlier draft of the script. But in the final film, it's just this bizarre, unexplained element. Some fans have speculated that it's meant to evoke classic horror imagery. The hook-handed figure is a staple of ghost stories and urban legends. Others think maybe Cook Jr. was playing the character as a war veteran with an injury. But the truth is, we'll probably never know. It's become one of those cult movie mysteries that fans argue about and theorize over. In a film that takes its core story seriously, this one strange detail stands out as delightfully inexplicable. Fact number 15. Let's end with the numbers because they tell an incredible story. Blacula was made for a modest budget of $500,000. That's cheap even by 1972 standards. American International Pictures was betting small, probably expecting a quick release to urban theaters and maybe a small profit if they were lucky. Instead, Blacula earned over $1 million at the box office, becoming one of the highest-grossing films of 1972. That's double the budget and an enormous return on investment. For context, this wasn't a film with massive marketing behind it or a wide suburban release. This was a film that succeeded primarily through word of mouth in Black communities, through audiences who were hungry to see themselves represented in horror cinema. The financial success of Blacula proved something that Hollywood executives had apparently needed proven: that Black audiences would show up for genre films, that Black actors could carry horror movies, that stories centering Black experiences could be commercially viable. It opened doors for Black filmmakers and actors that had been closed before. And it did it all while telling a story that actually had something to say about racism, identity, and dignity. Blacula stands as a landmark in Black cinema and horror cinema alike. It's not a perfect film. The budget constraints show some elements haven't aged well, and it definitely bears the marks of its blaxploitation era origins. But what William Marshall accomplished with his dignified performance, what William Crane achieved with his direction, what the film said about race and representation, all of that remains powerful more than 50 years later. The film refused to let its Black vampire be reduced to a joke or a stereotype. Prince Mamuwalde is tragic, romantic, dangerous, intelligent, everything Dracula was allowed to be in previous films. Marshall's insistence on rewriting the original racist script turned what could have been an embarrassing exploitation flick into something that actually respected its protagonist and its audience. Blacula's influence extends beyond just the blaxploitation horror films it directly inspired. It proved that horror could be a vehicle for social commentary about race. It showed that Black audiences deserved genre films made for them. It demonstrated that funk and soul music could work in horror soundtracks. It expanded who got to be the monster, who got to have their name in the title, who got to command the screen. When you watch Blacula today, you're watching a fascinating cultural artifact from a moment when Black cinema was asserting itself, when actors like William Marshall were demanding dignity and respect, when filmmakers were figuring out how to make genre films that spoke to Black experiences. You're seeing the birth of a subgenre, flaws and all, rough edges and all, but bursting with ambition and significance. The film spawned a sequel that brought back Marshall, but couldn't quite recapture the original's magic. There have been periodic rumors of reboots over the years, most recently in 2021, when MGM announced plans for a new version with Dion Taylor directing. But nothing has materialized yet. Maybe that's okay. Blacula exists as a product of its specific moment, and part of what makes it special is how thoroughly it captures early 70s Black culture, the blaxploitation era, and that particular intersection of horror and social consciousness. William Marshall went on to have a long career, but he'd always be remembered first and foremost as Prince Mamuwalde. He brought Shakespearean gravitas to a character that could have been a joke, and in doing so, he created one of horror's most iconic vampires. That deep bass voice, that commanding presence, that refusal to be diminished by the curse placed upon him, Marshall made Mamuwalde unforgettable. These 15 facts only scratch the surface of what makes Blacula fascinating. Every aspect of the production, from Marshall's fights for creative control to the guerrilla filmmaking necessitated by the tiny budget to the cultural moment that made the film possible, contributes to its legacy. It's a film that could only have been made in 1972 by these specific people under these specific circumstances. Blacula matters because it dared to center a Black character in a genre that had excluded them. It matters because one actor stood up and said, "Not like this," when handed a racist script. It matters because it proved that Black horror could be commercially successful and culturally significant. And it matters because more than 50 years later, we're still talking about it, still discovering it, still appreciating what it achieved against considerable odds. So yes, the title is campy. Yes, the budget was tiny. Yes, some elements haven't aged well. But Blacula remains essential viewing for anyone who wants to understand the history of Black cinema, the evolution of horror films, or how representation can transform entire genres. It's a cult classic that earned its status through ambition, dignity, and the refusal to settle for stereotypes. That's a legacy worth celebrating. If you enjoyed this deep dive into the classic film horror Blacula, don't forget to like this video, share it with other fans, and subscribe to our channel for more wild facts about your favorite urban horror films and series. Hit that notification bell so you never miss another upload. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you in the next video.